Hello everybody, welcome back to Big Brain History. Today we're doing another reaction video. I got a request to do a video on Operation Market Garden, which is exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to watch Operation Market Garden by Armchair Historian. I've watched a lot of Armchair Historian's videos. They're really good. I'm sure this one's going to be great. I've not seen this one, but I wanted to make sure I did a video on Operation Market Garden since it was requested. If you're the one that requested it, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot today. Let's get into it. Oh, before we start, if you want to see the original video without my commentary, as always, I'm going to link it in the description below, so you can go down there and check them out if you want to.
Excited to announce that today's video is sponsored by Audible. More on that later. Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the Armchair Historian. Today's video, Operation Market Garden, a World War II tutorial on how not to use paratroopers.
Yeah, before we get into this, I wanted to just give you a couple of my thoughts. Operation Market Garden is a really interesting topic to learn about because it shows how much disagreement there was in Allied leadership. Eisenhower was the supreme commander of all the forces for the Allies in World War II. But under him, he had different generals. They all were very interesting personalities, and they all did not like each other. And they all had their own plans of how to do things, and they didn't agree with each other on how to do it. And it was just a mess. And Eisenhower's job was to figure out what tactics were the best tactics and get everyone on board to work together to do those tactics, which was a nearly impossible task. And when it came to Operation Market Garden, this was Bernard Montgomery's plan. And he originally planned for Operation Comet, which is a completely different thing. Operation Market Garden was their plan to take the Netherlands away from Germany so they could get a way to invade Germany from. But the plan was super complex. It had way too many things going on. Plus, it had bad weather and all these logistical failures. Plus, when they landed, they didn't have radio. All of these things worked together to make it an absolute disaster. But Montgomery was 100% certain that this plan was going to work. So he actually went to Eisenhower to tell him his plan. And he was so mad at Eisenhower for not giving him his plan immediately that he took a file filled with messages from Eisenhower and ripped them in front of Eisenhower and just started screaming at Eisenhower. And Eisenhower, who I love, Eisenhower is a great historical figure. He put his hand on Montgomery's knee and he said, "Monty, you can't talk to me that way. I'm your boss." Which is great. But it was kind of doomed to fail from the start, but I'm sure he's going to give a lot of information about how exactly it went down.
On September 17, 1944, several thousand Allied airborne dropped from the skies into the Nazi-occupied Netherlands. More landed the next day and the day after. Comprising British, American, and even Polish troops, this force constituted the single largest airborne operation in history. Its objective was to open up a route to the German industrial heartland, the Ruhr Valley, in an attempt to end the war early. Instead, Market Garden ended up being one of the greatest Allied setbacks of the Second World War. In this video, we're going to be going through the operation day by day and location by location to explore why Market Garden was a bridge too far. Market Garden was the brainchild of Bernard Montgomery, famous for commanding British forces during the late North African campaign. It was designed to test Bernard's favored strategy for the final phase of the war in Europe.
Yeah, so Montgomery was a very proud leader, and he was a little upset that Eisenhower took his job away, whenever Eisenhower came in to be the Supreme Commander, which is something the Allies agreed upon, that after Normandy, Eisenhower would be the leader of all the Allied forces. But before that, Montgomery wasn't answering to Eisenhower, and he liked it that way. So when Eisenhower came in and started telling him what to do, he wasn't a fan of it, which made him very hard to work with. So when Montgomery came up with this plan for Operation Market Garden, he was very adamant that it was going to get done. But Eisenhower was very skeptical of the plan because it was a very, very complicated, complex plan. But Montgomery insisted that it would work. So eventually, Eisenhower kind of relented, but gave him limited priority. Like, okay, we'll do this. I'm skeptical, but here's what you need. Just leave me alone and go do your plan.
By concentrating Allied forces for a small yet powerful thrust into Germany. Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower, whom Montgomery often clashed with, had been championing a so-called broad strategy of keeping Allied forces distributed along a wide front, putting pressure on German positions along the entire border. When offensive progress began to slow following the liberation of Brussels in early September, Eisenhower gave the go-ahead to implement a smaller-scale version of Montgomery's plans for a narrow front. His approval was designed to test both the strategic viability of such a thrust and the effectiveness of the Allied airborne army, still relatively new to the field of battle.
Yeah, one reason that Eisenhower approved this plan was that he was under a lot of pressure from Washington to use the airborne divisions. They really wanted to use them in combat. They had all of these airborne divisions ready to go. They're just sitting in England, and they really wanted to use them some more. So he was under pressure to use them, and then when he saw Operation Market Garden was a good opportunity to use them, it was kind of one reason why Eisenhower agreed to do the plan in the first place. But it's also important to know who the Allies are fighting here. This is not the main German forces. A lot of the German soldiers are in the East fighting the Soviets, because the German war in the East is just fascinating. Honestly, it's probably my favorite part of World War II to learn about. Probably. Because just how brutal and evil it was. It was just bad on bad, and they were just there to kill and torture each other. I love the dark side of history, so that's interesting to me. But the Germans knew what was going to happen to them if the Soviets won, so most of their military was focused on the East. A lot of the guys in the West were just there just to hold back the Allies long enough, and this is the crazy German mindset. They thought that they could just hold them on long enough until they defeated the Soviets, which was never going to happen. But it was just there to slow the Allies down until they realized, oh my gosh, we're not going to beat the Soviets, and then they try to do crazy last-ditch counterattacks to defeat the Allies in the West, which weren't going to happen. But this is kind of like what's left of the German army. But the Allies knew that, and the Allies thought that the soldiers that were here were kind of exhausted and worn down, and that they were just going to get steamrolled. But that didn't happen, especially in Operation Market Garden. The Dutch resistance, who were in the Netherlands, were trying to give the intelligence to the Allies that, hey, the guys that are here that you're going to attack with Operation Market Garden, these guys are really good soldiers. It's the Panzer Corps. They're really good. They're well-trained. I believe it's called the SS Panzer Corps. I think that's what they're called. I'll have to do a little research to make sure. But these guys are well-trained. They're here to fight. They're not just going to give up. But the Allies were so set on doing Operation Market Garden that they ignored the intelligence in favor of more positive intelligence. They wanted good news. They didn't want to hear the Dutch news of, hey, these guys are actually going to be a hard fight. So they kind of ignored the Dutch's warnings that these guys were better soldiers than they're expecting. And then they went ahead and did Operation Market Garden, and we're going to see what happens.
So what was Montgomery's proposal? The plan called for a massive flanking maneuver around the heavily fortified German Siegfried Line through the Low Countries. If that sounds familiar, it's because that's exactly what the Germans did to the French in both World Wars, with varying degrees of success. Hey, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? Market Garden was actually the combination of two component operations named, you guessed it, Market and Garden. Operation Market was the airborne component, in which paratroopers would land at several points between the Dutch cities of Arnhem and Eindhoven to secure the bridges over the Meuse, Veyle, and Lower Rhine rivers, as well as a number of canals. If you've ever been to the Netherlands, you'll know it's about 70% river, so these points had to be taken before Operation Garden, the large-scale deployment of armor over the Dutch-German border, could commence. This joint force, which consisted of 50,000 troops of the 30th Corps under Lieutenant General Brian Herricks, was to begin in the southwest and end at Arnhem. Allied commanders hoped that if Market Garden...
Before he goes on, you can kind of see the problem with this plan. If you're looking at this map, if something is to happen on this road right here, what are the ground forces supposed to do? All of this is just a maze of floodland, rivers, marshes, and just impossible territory for land forces to get across efficiently. So if something happens to this main highway, what's going to happen? That's exactly the problem they ran into. They had this whole plan so meticulously detailed that it all relied on a series of events happening right on the time that they had planned. They expected these ground forces to get up into the Netherlands to relieve the airborne divisions. I think they gave them 48 hours to do that. I believe it was 48 hours, but they only had one highway to get their entire land army, which I believe, if I remember correctly, I think it's like 35,000 men that they're trying to march on this one little highway through the Netherlands to relieve all these airborne divisions that were set to capture like 9 bridges. And they had to do it in a certain time span. But they didn't anticipate that, hey, 35,000 soldiers and all of this equipment and vehicles and all this military equipment, it's gonna get a traffic jam. It can't all just go on one highway just efficiently like that. So of course traffic jams happen. Also, if you have all this one highway, the Germans know that if you're attacking, you're going to be on that one highway. So that leaves you open to flank attacks. That leaves you open to all kinds of things. So all of this plan rests on the land army trying to get to this one highway to relieve all these airborne divisions. And that's the biggest, well, probably the most obvious problem to this plan.
Was successful, they could end the war by Christmas of 1944. Before we delve into the details about what exactly transpired, there's a few things we should go over. First off, to those who don't know already, paratroopers are light infantry units who can't carry very heavy weapons, so historically they have had to rely on surprise and speed to gain the advantage. Throughout this video, you'll notice how the Allies failed to play at those strengths. Moreover, Operation Market Garden was predicated on an overly optimistic timetable that assumed that the paratroopers could hold out long enough for the 30th Corps to reach them. On top of that, the soft Dutch soil was judged to be impassable for mechanized and heavy armor, so the 30th Corps had to follow a single paved highway. That narrow channel of movement left them badly exposed to German anti-tank fire from all sides while traveling.
Yeah, and he's talking about this, what I just mentioned. But if you see, the Allies are moving in a column along this one highway. What happens when you take out the first tank? That already just destroys your timetable. That's going to slow you down. But it's not just going to be the first tank. Maybe the first 10 tanks get taken out. Then there's no way you're going to get down this highway. Honestly, it kind of surprises me that Montgomery was so adamant that this could be done this quickly. He was adamant that he could go to Berlin in I think it was like 2 days or something like that, which is 500 miles. He was very ambitious and was very confident in his abilities, but a little too confident, which is one reason why this plan was such a disaster.
Furthermore, Allied planners did not heed a report from the Dutch resistance that a veteran Panzer Corps was stationed nearby, undergoing maintenance, but still capable of defensive deployment. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a great way to lose rock, paper, scissors, or, infantry tank, anti-tank. Now, let's get on to the operation.
Days after my birthday.
Tomorrow, we go into action. If by sacrificing all this, I leave a world slightly better than I found it, I am perfectly willing to make that sacrifice. Private Ivor Robbery, South Stratfordshire Regiment, killed in action, September 17th, 1944. An air armada of nearly 1,500 Allied aircraft and more than 400 gliders take to the skies. The paratroopers aboard these planes will be dropped far into enemy territory, completely surrounded and nearly 60 miles away from friendly territory.
Before we go on, I want to show you guys a picture of Operation Market Garden. There's actually a picture you can find of all these paratroopers falling, and they're all jumping out of the airplane, and it's incredible. The amount of paratroopers that were used in this operation is astounding. But to know that we actually have pictures of this, it's crazy. It's just the sky is filled with parachutes. But here, let me show you the picture. Okay, so here's a picture I found of Operation Market Garden. This is nowhere near all of the paratroopers that were landing. This is just a picture of part of it. But as you can see, it's just a couple of planes at the top of the screen, and they are dropping hundreds of these paratroopers down. So if you're a German soldier and you happen to see this and you look up and you just see, I think it was 30,000 paratroopers just coming down from the sky, and they're all there to kill you, that'd be a little scary. But you're going to learn by the end of this video, a lot of these guys do not make it. It's a butcher. It's a horrible tragedy.
In the early afternoon, the first paratroopers hit the ground. The initial insertions are actually quite successful, with soldiers at all major sites accurately hitting their landing zones. However, Lloyd Clark, a military historian at the University of Buckingham, notes that The Allied operation began with airborne troops accurately hitting their drop zones, yet their very success actually assisted the German response from the start. Because the troops weren't scattered, the Germans could easily pinpoint where they had hit the ground and make a quick deduction of the likely objectives of the Allied operation. Furthest to the north is Arnhem, where the 1st British Airborne Division under Major General Roy Auchart are to take a road bridge and a rail bridge that both cross the Lower Rhine. Auchart's force lands a dozen miles to the west of their targets due to a concentration of German anti-aircraft batteries near the town of Oosterbeek. They are forced to fight through scattered German opposition to reach their objectives.
Yeah, and that's a disaster. The fact that they couldn't get them all the way to Arnhem because of the anti-aircraft. They dropped them like 8 miles outside of the city. And remember, these guys are on foot, and it's really difficult terrain that they got to get across. And remember what he said. The entire objective of the paratroopers is, for their success, is surprise. When they watch you fall 8 miles out of the city, and you're on foot, which is going to take you hours to get there, they're going to be completely ready for you. That immediately eliminates the advantage that paratroopers have over the enemy. This is one big reason why this whole plan fails. These airborne troops are set up to fail, and it's a disaster.
This resistance does not initially stop Auchart's men, but it does seriously delay them. What's more, the Allies lack enough planes to transport all of the men required for this attack. Thus, a large contingent of the 1st Airborne must stay behind to protect the landing sites and supply drops. In yet another stroke of bad luck, the radio sets the British are using experience technical failure that effectively eliminates General Auchart's ability to communicate with his men or with artillery and air support. While the Germans are getting more organized, the Allies are getting progressively less organized. Only the 750-man 2nd Battalion, commanded by John Frost, reaches either of the division's objectives. Their secondary objective, a rail bridge, is destroyed just as they arrive, so they hastily move on towards their primary target, the Arnhem Bridge, and hold up in 18 houses just north of the bridge. Reinforcements are stopped by the German Kampfgruppe Spindler, assembled primarily from elements of the 9th SS Panzer Division, leaving Frost on his own for the time being. To the south, the US 82nd Airborne Infantry Division under Brigadier General Jim Gavin, or Jumpin' Jim as his men like to call him, lands with 7,500 troops near Nijmegen. They take the southernmost of their 2 objectives, a bridge over the Maas River, as well as the undefended Groesbeck Heights to the southeast, where supplies and reinforcements will be dropped in the coming days. From here, they begin shelling the nearby forest of Reichswald, from which they expect a German counterattack, though they aren't certain. Later that same day, a small detachment of 400 men is sent to capture the 2nd bridge over the Veyle River, just north of Nijmegen. Unfortunately for the Americans, the 10th SS Panzer Division, made up of approximately 3,000 men, rushes in to stop them from reaching their objective. In Eindhoven, the 101st Airborne under Maxwell D. Taylor lands and captures 3 of 5 intended targets. Crucially, however, the men of the 101st fail to take the crossings at Best and Sun, which Nazi forces blow up behind them. Both of these bridges cross the same canal, so at least one has to be reconstructed if troops are going to cross.
Yeah, remember, this whole plan depends on the ground forces getting there and time to relieve them. But how are they going to get to the forces in Arnhem way farther north when all of these bridges are blowing up further south? It's just every single problem that they run into slows their advance, which is going to ruin the whole plan because it's all dependent on all of these things happening right on time. I don't know why they didn't think that they didn't account for all of these mistakes and all of these problems that they're going to encounter. It's astonishing to me.
The process greatly slows down the advance. Worse still, an Allied glider attached to the 101st crashes and plans for the entire operation fall into German hands. Despite some success, Operation Market Garden is not exactly off to an auspicious start. The landing was due at 10 o'clock, but it came and went, and no aircraft, gliders, or anything appeared. Gordon Jock Walker, Sergeant, British Army Film and Photographic Unit. The next morning, poor weather in England prevents the launch of a second airborne wave that was initially scheduled for 0600 hours. That deployment and many of the subsequent supply drops scheduled for today fail to arrive on time, if they arrive at all. As dawn breaks, John Frost is all alone. He and the 2nd Battalion are in Arnhem, repelling contingents of the Kampfgruppe Spindler that scrambled up from Nijmegen to the south the night before. The 2nd Battalion is doing an admirable job, but is surrounded and running low on supplies. The 1st and 3rd slowly make their way into western Arnhem, but are stopped by German forces in the city and do not successfully link up with the 2nd. Meanwhile, the 4th Battalion finally makes their landing, but does not join the rest of the division on this day. Ockart himself is pinned down during the advance of the 1st Battalion and actually hides inside of a Dutch house for the day. Without a functioning radio to keep in contact with his men, he is considered missing in action, thereby putting Brigadier General Philip Hicks in temporary command. In Nijmegen, the Americans of the 82nd have beaten back a small German attack and are reinforced with a second wave of paratroopers. However, they have yet to take the all-important Veil Bridge, and the Germans have begun crossing the river by boat, setting up defensive positions around the Americans' objectives. German commanders, now in possession of the Allied war plans, conclude that victory at Nijmegen is crucial to the overall defeat of Market Garden. Victory at Arnhem and Eindhoven would be meaningless without a route between them. Speaking of which, the British 30th Corps arrives in Eindhoven late in the day and begins construction of a makeshift bridge, while the 101st Airborne holds off attacks from a handful of hastily assembled German forces from the west. I think we're going a bridge too far. Lieutenant General Frederick Browning apocryphally during the planning of Operation Market Garden.
There's a great movie about that too, A Bridge Too Far.
In Arnhem, John Frost is outnumbered, outgunned, and becoming increasingly desperate. His forces now occupy only 10 houses on the northern side of Arnhem Bridge. The 2nd Battalion is unable to stop German tanks from crossing and comes under heavy artillery fire. The remaining battalions make one more push to move through western Arnhem and are beaten back so severely that they actually have to retreat past their original landing zones, meaning that the Germans would get their hands on all of the new supplies. In the confusion, Ockart does manage to rejoin the 1st Airborne, at least what was left of it. Meanwhile, the 1st Polish Independent Paratrooper Brigade, meant to reinforce the British division, is still unable to deploy because of poor weather in England and the Netherlands. Meanwhile, the 30th Corps finishes construction and proceeds to Nijmegen, where it links up with the 82nd Airborne. The newly combined force attempts to take the Veil Bridge, but advances only slowly. Lastly, the 101st Airborne is still holding its position in the south and repels a counterattack against the makeshift crossing by the 107th Panzer Division.
It's honestly, with all the problems that they're running into, it's day 4. The paratroopers are putting up a awesome fight. Like, they are giving the Germans all they can handle, but there's only so long they can last, especially without resupplies. You just heard they can't take off in the bad weather to resupply them, so they're not getting resupplies of ammo, they're not getting rations, they're not getting anything. And they're just there to fight until all of that can happen. And they have no idea when this... Imagine being one of these paratroopers. You're way behind enemy lines, fighting an enemy that far outnumbers you, and they could come from any direction. You're there alone, and it's getting worse, and you're starting to realize that this plan's not going very well. This would be terrifying. But these guys are very, very brave, and they deserve all of the accolades that they get for this. It's really incredible what they did.
And grenades flew in every direction. Each house had to be taken this way. Some of the British offered resistance to their last breath. A German soldier at Arnhem.
It's amazing.
The rest of the 1st Airborne gives up hope of reaching the 2nd Battalion, as it is pushed into an increasingly compact area around eastern Oosterbeek. Frost himself is captured. The Polish reinforcements are nowhere to be found. However, hope comes from the south, as Allied forces in Nijmegen finally make some progress. By sending a contingent of troops across the river by boat and attacking the Germans from the rear, the 30th Corps and 82nd Airborne finally take control of the bridge at Nijmegen by the end of the day. The retreating Germans attempt and fail to destroy the crossing on their way out. Surprisingly, the 30th Corps does not immediately move out, as several of their elements are still pinned down in the city. A rare bright spot for the Allies in this operation, the capture of Nijmegen means that the center of their corridor is secure for now. Out of ammunition, God save the King. Final transmission from the 2nd Battalion, 1st British Airborne Division on September 24th, 1944.
What an incredible thing. Like, could you imagine receiving that transmission? Like, imagine being Montgomery in this situation. This whole plan is your idea. And you were so confident that this was going to work that you were basically screaming at Eisenhower to do it. You were responsible for 30, well, actually, I guess it's about over 60,000 soldiers in this operation. And you hear that one of your paratroopers, one of your airborne divisions, sends a message and it says, "Out of ammunition, God save the King." Like that's them saying we're gonna die. It's horrible.
4. The 2nd Battalion at Arnhem Bridge is completely wiped out by overwhelming German forces today, ending their impressive holdout. Approximately 1,984 men are killed and 6,854 captured. Ockart does not have time to grieve. The remaining members of the 1st Airborne, now only 3,500 out of 10,000, try to hold on to a strip of land north of the river where a potential new bridge could be constructed. Throughout the day, 750 Polish fighters, roughly at half strength under Stanisław Sosabowski, finally touched down in Driel to the southeast under a rain of gunfire. The onslaught decimates them as the 30th Corps, relentlessly harassed by German artillery fire, finally gets in range of Oosterbeek and starts to provide supporting fire. The soldier on the stretcher at my feet lay upwards, his eyes heavily bandaged. I had no further use now for my steel helmet, so I took it off and covered his face. Godfrey Friedman, British glider pilot, captured at Arnhem. Today, the tides really start to turn against the Allies. In Arnhem, 60 Poles managed to cross the Rhine and join with the 1st Airborne, which itself is now running out of supplies. Bad weather has deprived them of crucial air support as well as the ability to resupply. When German Colonel Kurt Student launches a massive counterattack against both sides of the Eindhoven-Nijmegen corridor, the 30th Corps and 82nd Airborne have to take valuable time to re-establish a link to the south. Ockart is still alone and the walls are closing in. German snipers are beginning to infiltrate his lines, and he has fewer than 2,000 utterly exhausted men left. Saturday morning, a brief truce is declared, and 1,200 wounded British and Polish soldiers are taken prisoner. We did not get our final bridgehead, and that must be admitted. General Bernard Montgomery. A small number of men from the 30th Corps manages to reach Driel and establishes a connection with what's left of the 1st Airborne, while 300 more Poles make it across the river in attack boats.
Yeah, side note, I don't know if you can hear it, but the ticking clock that's on the sound effects in this video, it's a pretty cool touch. I like that. It reminds me of Dunkirk. It's a good point.
All of this is too little, too late. Allied commanders are no longer discussing the possibility of reinforcement. Their only hope is evacuation. Under the cover of darkness and artillery fire, the 1st Airborne Division and their Polish allies make their way across the Rhine and back to safety. All told, 1,741 of the 10,000 men dropped as part of the 1st Airborne Division make it back to Allied territory. So, what went wrong? Basically everything, even the weather. As we've already mentioned, the airborne troops were ill-equipped to face armored divisions stationed in the area, and the Germans seemed to know exactly where to place their defenders. That problem was compounded by the fact that the British Army lacked the aircraft to drop the 1st Airborne all at once. You tend to lose the element of surprise when you have to drop your men into the same spot over multiple days. Members of the Dutch underground provided warnings about the 99th Panzers, but may have also compromised the operation from the start. The Germans as a whole were also being commanded by a renowned defensive strategist, Field Marshal Walter Model, who was able to oversee his forces from his HQ in Arnhem itself. As for Allied command, historians tend to focus on Lieutenant General Frederick Browning, who was in charge of the 1st Allied Airborne Army. But their focus was not one born out of admiration, but rather of sharp criticism. In fact, many historians, as well as General John Frost, point to him as bearing at least some of the blame for why the operation went downhill. Rather than any one issue in particular, a number of factors had to go wrong all at once for Market Garden to fail as spectacularly as it did.
Yeah, you can't pinpoint this entire failure to one problem. It was everything. I guess if you wanted to pinpoint to one problem, was that the plan itself was just way too complicated and depended on way too many variables to go right. It makes for a terrible plan. I'm really surprised that it got passed in the first place.
Among these problems were the placement of the 1st Airborne's drop zone too far from Arnhem Bridge, its communication blackout, the 24-hour delay of the 30th Corps, the decision at Nijmegen to delay the capture of the Veil Bridge by several hours after landing, ultimately delaying the 30th Corps even further, and relentlessly unfavorable weather. Nonetheless, Market Garden was not a complete failure, at least according to the memoir of Bernard Montgomery, published 14 years later.
I knew my stuff, sir, and that, I think, was a...
Did you ever lose a battle, Field Marshal?
No.
That's the important thing, isn't it?
Could you imagine being Eisenhower having to work with these guys? They're so... like, people like MacArthur. These guys have such big personalities that they're blind to some realities. They just think that they are perfect and that if it's their plan, it won't go wrong. I'm sure Montgomery had a million excuses for why this plan didn't work. I guess in his mind, it did. I don't know. I've not really researched what Montgomery believed happened in the battle itself. I just knew what happened in the operation. But that's crazy. It was a failure, a complete failure. And he's just not taking responsibility. All of those soldiers that died, all of the men that lost their lives. And remember, these men, they're not, I mean, you can say men, they are men, but they're 18 years old, a lot of them. Some of them might even be younger than that. And they died, and he's over here laughing about how he never lost a battle. It's disgusting.
If you'd like to learn more about the later stages of the Second World War with some of my favorite books on the topic, we have an exciting announcement for you.
Yeah, okay, so I think the video's done. Yeah, the video's over. I really love this video. It's a great video. Animated Armchair Historian is a great channel. I definitely recommend you guys check him out. Like I said, I'll leave the description below for you guys to go check him out. We'll definitely be watching more of his videos in the future. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out. I'm really excited to do more reaction videos for you guys. And I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for watching.